get, industry as well as government, as well as cities, municipalities, people that are really making an impact in the way we live and the way we do our business. And today, as I told you last week, we have Robert Reid. He's the Senior Chief of Continuous Performance Improvement for the Department of the Navy. We have Dr. M. James Allen with us, a thought-leading consultant in Lean in Government, advisor and founder of Lean Diagnostics Institute. And they're with us here in this first segment, so I'd like to welcome them to the Lean Nation today. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carl.
And, it's pretty profound, especially with what the president came out with, and the withdrawal from the Middle East and our posts out there, that you guys really have had challenges for the last 10, 11 years in supporting our men and women over there and giving them the best and highest quality and the quickest turnaround. Now you have a whole set of new challenges, I'm sure, that you're faced with, correct?
That would be correct, Carl.
And you guys head up a group called LSS, Change Management and Sustainability Initiatives in the Government. So could you tell us a little bit about that and what some of the acronyms are that you gentlemen use to, drive operational excellence and continuous improvement there?
Well, I'll yield to Dr. Allen. I believe that he had a slide for LSS in general, or at least ability to talk through it more on the civilian side, and then I'll give some modifications on the military.
So I'll get Ed to cue up the, and Dr. Allen, that was the LDI slide, I think, initiative?
We'll try that one and see if it's correct.
LDI slide, Ed. Go ahead, Dr. Allen.
Lean, which is the concept of systematic continuous improvement and cultural change across an organization. And Six Sigma, which is one of the tools resident inside that toolkit, which demonstrates to data collection and normalization of that data so that we can determine where the risks are and where the variation is in the compatibility. So when you combine the two of them, you have a general framework with Lean and a specific tool for continuous improvement with Six Sigma.
Well, Six Sigma is critical in the environment that you guys are, because general practice in industry, there's only a few industries that really use the Six Sigma tool, and Lean is kind of the overarching, but you have men and women's lives, you have different things happening there, so I can see that. So Dr. Allen, how did you come across meeting Robert Reid here to get some things going in the government? Because it's a critical time. Budgets and I mean, you listen to it every night on the nightly news, and just our own state of the state inside our own states that we live in, that there are short dollars here and there are big gaps, and we spend more than we take in.
Well, you said it all. Robert is a fine representative of the U.S. Navy. And the work that he's done over there has been consistently powerful in its return to that entity. Robert and I are LinkedIn compadres, as it were. We've discovered each other on my LinkedIn site, Lean Cultural Transformation. And since then, I've been following him and the work that he's done and have been very impressed with it. The situation, of course, that we have in the budgetary scenario with the federal government is one where we have and there's another slide on this one, we've got about a $14.7 million budget deficit, and that's going up, I believe, something like, excuse me, I said 14.7 billion, I meant trillion. That's going up by about 1.65 trillion a year in 2010. So we have an ever-increasing type of pain or a burning platform with respect to the federal government. To Keep America Strong is an organization that has been promulgated by a gentleman by the name of Mike George, and they estimate that we can find with Lean Six Sigma something in the vicinity of $500 billion or $500 billion worth of savings or cost reductions. I would say that there's a bigger challenge than that. That one of the things that we have to think about doing is addressing that $1.67 trillion worth of annual increase in the debt by finding that kind of savings through Lean Six Sigma across all branches of government. So if we can do that, which I don't think is very unreasonable as a challenge, then we can talk about a stabilized debt at the $14.7 trillion because we're capturing savings from Lean Six Sigma, and we don't have to raise revenues, we don't have to raise taxes with respect to that perspective. Then as spending issues are addressed and decreases are created across the government entity, then that becomes subject to decreases in taxes.
So, and that's a huge challenge because it sounds like I'm listening into a congressional hearing here, and it's really important for us to do this kind of stuff. And here you sit, Robert. It's all in your lap because James and I can talk all we want, but you're the guy doing the Gemba. You are happening where the work happens. How did you get involved with this? What does your daily day look like in this big challenge?
Well, I'll tell you, Carl, my job is Lean Six Sigma / CPI deployment champion at a integrated Navy and Marine Corps maintenance site. And what I do in that capacity, I mentioned CPI, and a lot of your listeners may not know what that is. Within the military, Lean Six Sigma is an integral part of our overall CPI, continuous process improvement deployment plan. And of note, back in 2004, when we went official with this course of direction, we integrated TOC, if you're familiar with theories of constraint, with Lean Six Sigma. That's something that not many corporations have done, not many people out in industry, because there's an apparent disagreement between TOC and Lean, but there is a way to merge these things together. So my day is consumed with taking in opportunities from the deck plates. The deck plates is where what we refer to in the military, or specifically in the Navy, as where the work is being done. We have green belts that are deployed all throughout the work centers, and they bring their ideas forward. And this is, I think, a very important element of a successful deployment plan, is to have ideas and proposals elevated from where the work is being done instead of casting everything down line. Now, that's on a very micro level, but I've also had some engagement over the last couple of years more on the macro level, working with the Navy as a system as opposed to just my little four walls or little area here in Fort Worth, Texas.
Okay.
So some of the opportunities that I've had along that way is where I guess you could say the rubber meets the road on a DON level. Some of these opportunities have come to me more through inadvertence, I guess you could say. I saw some opportunities at our local area and started pushing for replication. but a very significant area that I want to get to in the discussion later on is going to tie into, what's down the road,
Okay.
what's in the future for us. So I'll wait to get to that topic. But bottom line for this area of discussion is when we look at CPI as continuous performance improvement as opposed to just a process improvement, but we look at it as a performance improvement across an entire agency. This is where we're going to really start tackling some of those big numbers across a federal agency, like what Dr. Allen was discussing. We don't need just $10,000 here or $20,000 there. We need a system that is going to render the same level of protection, the same level of services, but where we're saving hundreds of billions of dollars per year.
Yeah. And the one question I have for both you gentlemen, because in industry, private industry that we work in, is that lean initiatives, TPS, operational excellence, the acronyms that we use, it really doesn't cost that much money. Because what we're doing is turning our organizations into a bunch of problem solvers and people that have ability to solve complex problems and continually improve. So it's not like you're going, for another budget line item. Is the same thing happen with your CPI and your theory of constraints, is that you're funding within just the brain power, and that's where you really would reap some big rewards?
Well, of course we have, if I may.
Yes.
One of the most important fundamental things about lean transformation, and I like to call it lean cultural transformation, is that the very first time you dismiss someone or you fire someone as a result of a lean initiative that you have done, it will be the very last lean initiative that you ever do in that organization.
Right.
Because people bow their necks and they say, I'm not going to do this if it's going to mean my job. So as a fundamental precept of lean transformation, the concept becomes one of increasing your capacity because you shortened your lead time, which brings more capability, not capability, but capacity that's available to be filled by new work, whether it's in the commercial sector or in the government sector or in the military, as it were. And you increase the visibility because you have a shortened lead time of these value stream flows. You have an increased visibility of the quality issues that are there. That perhaps the batch sizes are smaller. You're closer to one-piece flow on your value streams. And the quality issues are addressed immediately at the point where they occur, rather than being moved on down the value chain and accruing additional value as the process moves ahead. So once you see a transformation start to occur, yes, there may be opportunities for leaning out human resources, but those are not human resources to be discarded. Those are human resources to be cherished and used in the growth process, because lean is fundamentally a growth process. So you open up all this capacity. Now you have additional people that you've already trained in lean that can be used to fill that capacity. And what turns out is you end up with a much more highly sophisticated workforce, and a workforce that only decreases through natural attrition or someone finding another job someplace else or something else. There's very few, if any, layoffs that are ever necessary. So with respect to this sort of efficiency expert mentality, which back in the 50s and 60s, they would bring efficiency experts into organizations and they would say, this guy's got to go and that person has to go over there, and you'd be much more efficient if you shaved your workforce by 20%. Besides, here's the money, the direct labor that you could save if you just did that. And so people were losing their jobs right and left. And so we don't like the stigma associated with the efficiency expert to be applied to the lean cultural transformation expert or the Six Sigma expert or the DMAIC practitioner.
Well, as people move up the knowledge base here, James, about this, redeploying people, giving people more knowledge and more creativity helps everybody, and especially in the Navy, to have people that are multi-skilled in many different tasks, and to be able to be flexible just makes us stronger. But with James here, with Robert, to do that, he's not getting rid of people in Navy. I don't think you can have 500 guys swabbing the poop deck on some Navy ship, or something like this. You have certain mandates and certain turnarounds, and today we have the Toby Hanna guys at the Army Depot here, and they've done amazing things. You're doing amazing things. How do we get all these connections to happen, Robert? Because there are some amazing things going on in the government that you guys are looking at spending, and you're being very conscious about process improvement that doesn't cost a lot of money, and I'm sure it hasn't cost you a lot of money training your people to date, correct?
Well, I'll tell you, Carl, it's a mixed bag. You can look at it a lot of different ways. If you look at how much money is spent on consultancy and how much money is spent on training, when you look at a system as large as the DoD, or in particular as large as the DON, it can be a large number. And one thing that's bothersome about that is that large number may look attractive when somebody is looking at, okay, well, where am I spending money, and how can I reduce that? Okay, so anytime that you're dealing with spending large amounts of money towards training, that's one of the first things that gets put onto a axe block.
Oh, okay, okay.
The problem that exists, though, is when you look at that money that you're spending, you absolutely have to look at the amount of return on that investment and balance that. One of the concerns that we have within the DoD system, and I'm sure it exists through all the other government services, is our use-lose budget model that we have across the federal government. And that use-lose budget model creates a certain type of culture within the government services to where somebody doesn't want to say, well, I don't need this money anymore, or I can cut out this budget line, because what it means is they won't have it the following year.
Okay.
We all know from having experienced transformations in the past, to get a transformation to a full level of maturity, it may take a few years before you're reaping all that benefit and you're stabilized in that change. Does that make sense to you,
Yeah,
Carl?
it makes sense. So and in the private sector, we kind of self-fund this as you get going. You have consultants that come in, get the basic principles, and then you start doing this. So it is training dollars, yes, but it's not like you're going out to buy new computer systems or to do revamps, building new buildings, because those are the constraints that you have, and you're teaching people to solve for those constraints. So I was kind of looking down that road, that when you get the knowledge, you're getting people to have more knowledge, and then they can solve these complex problems without spending more money, because they figure out really creative solutions to add value where they need and support the customer, what the customer is looking for.
Absolutely. And, when we talk about the customer, that's an evolutionary process as well. In any early deployment, you're going to see an organization is going to see the customer as being an inward customer. Even within a large organization, they have trouble seeing the customer as being outside of those four walls. This is something that over the past few years, we've had a lot of growth and development within the Department of Navy and the Department of Defense, where we're not seeing the customer as limited within our process. We're seeing the customer as that organizational unit, but more so, ultimately you're our customer.
Right.
Taxpayer is our customer, and we're starting to have that shift and that turn in mentality, and that's actually advantageous as we can spread that shift in culture. That's where the true concern for the the cost savings is going to come into. Okay, if that makes sense.
No, it makes total sense.
What we had to focus on first, though, was mission readiness, mission capability. How can we achieve the mission more reliably? How can we do it better? When we were facing two battlefronts just in the very recent past, and a lot of that focus was towards doing those missions and the missions that we have ahead of us, because we all know that there's going to be a next mission. So the mission readiness mantra within the Department of Defense is a much stronger mantra than is the cost savings.
But the same type of tools and techniques for mission readiness can be deployed when you don't have the mission ready, because you're training. This whole thing of TOC, CPI, lean is about training, doing these katas, exercising over and over the brain, and then you have the routines to do, whether you need to do mission ready or mission comeback or just sustainability and cost reduction. And cost reduction in mission ready, as you know, is just a function of that. If you get better and better at doing mission ready, it's going to cost you less and less and less, because you're going to have less rework, less quality issues, and all the other waste that general industry occurs. So you save dollars, right?
Absolutely. I'm glad that you turned it that direction, because what I always say is, let the dollars follow the improvement. Okay, what tends to happen a lot of times, and it's not just peculiar to the Department of Defense, we do this all over the place. If you tell me that my responsibility to you is to save you X amount of dollars, I'm going to find some way to make that appear on a spreadsheet. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Have you seen this before?
Self-fulfilling prophecy.
Absolutely.
You're going to make it happen.
But at what cost?
Yeah.
Did I cheat something? Did I cut short on something else? Okay, did I suboptimize that process?
Right.
One of the really big challenges that we have across the federal government is what we call silo workforces. We all work in silos. We all have an upline that has a vertical organization chart associated with it, and we're concentrated on our piece of the pie.
Yeah.
Okay, and one of the things that we've really experienced through Lean Six Sigma, through other CPI initiatives, is the ability to replicate, the ability to benchmark against each other, and start tearing down some of that silo construct to where we can start having our organization operate with less redundancy and down those walls, because ultimately the job is going to get done in a horizontal fashion as opposed to a vertical fashion when you're looking at an entire system.
And we have a question from a viewer, and this is the beauty about being on Ustream and coming from Talk Radio. Greg Carroll has this question. Within the Navy, we need to know where our costs exist. Also, we need to standardize processes. Is that part of the system that you're working with now?
Oh, absolutely. The alignment is more of a key word to discuss as opposed to standardizing. If we elevate our attention and our focus on system alignment, the amount of redundancies is astronomical. When we have a truly aligned system, but again, we're getting back to that silo construct, okay? And a silo construct, which 50 years ago, when we had a Department of Defense that was structured under a silo construct, that was fine for that day and age. In today's day and age, though, and with the technologies that we have and the concerns and the challenges, we need to have this alignment in our system to where everybody throughout the organization does the same type of a job, the same type of a way. I don't want to hog up all the time from Dr. Allen, but I want to get onto a point real
Please
quick,
do.
and then I'll jump off of it.
Yep.
Um, there, there's a program called Manager's Internal Control
Okay.
Program. Okay, this OMB mandate, and it's a federal mandate, and backed up by statutes that we have to afford reasonable assurance. Okay, the federal government has to have reasonable assurances of its processes. And this reasonable assurance is responsible all the way up to the President of the United States, reported through the Senate and Congress. And then each agency head for the Department of Defense, the agency head being SecDef, SecDef is responsible to report to Congress and the Senate once a year that he has reasonable assurance that all of the processes underneath them have identified their risk and have mitigated those risks or elevated them to a level to where there's like a plan of action and milestones that's associated with mitigating or managing those risks. Now, can you imagine having that responsibility for millions of people?
Huge. Huge.
It's huge. Do you think it has been done in recent years?
It probably hasn't because of all the different things, you know, and just the information and the complexity of what we're doing today as compared to before. It probably hasn't been done.
It hasn't been done. And you know, again, and it's not because anybody set out to fit.
Right.
It's a system. Our system doesn't allow for the true, honest to goodness effect to take place that's necessary. Because, get back to that silo construct. The Manager's Internal Control Program across the federal agencies, you have huge segments of the federal agencies that have their own way of managing that. Well, if you have a system where you have your own unique way of managing it, and you try and compile those together at a later time, that lack of alignment is going to prevent you from being able to report effectively. So that's where one of the things that we have going on right now is under the heading of Lean Six Sigma and CPI is to bring that alignment into the system. And the epiphany, I guess you could say, that we had just this last summer was if we had one system that was common core and common language across the entire Department of Defense, starting out with segments of Department of the Navy, that could bring forward all of this program element and all of its requirements.
Did we lose you? Did we lose him, Doctor?
Well, there's that portrait that I'm sure he doesn't want anybody to see right there. Which I think
that's his screensaver. So Ed will kill his screensaver. But Dr. Allen, you know, the what Robert Reid's saying here is that almost we need another branch of government that should be working with operational excellence. And I hate to be a proponent for another branch, but a branch that can get everybody in alignment. I mean, there's so much opportunity.
This is the conversation that I personally had 25 years ago in the commercial sector.
Yes.
And that has been going on continuously ever since with respect to the organizational structure of a company. Coming out of the last World War, there was a tendency to replicate that military silo scenario. And do you still have me?
We still have you, yes.
Okay. And that was replicated in the private sector as well. So major multinational corporations and others mimicking them continue to develop that sort of a structure where you had a vertically aligned rather than a matrix type organization. And each department or area had their responsibilities. They had their responsible people, their accountable people. They had their strategic initiatives that they were responsible for. And there was a tremendous amount of ownership and cooperation and teamwork and human resources within each of those silos, but very little between each silo. So as a result of that, it was like if you had 6 separate departments in a company, it was like 6 separate companies almost. They weren't communicating necessarily back and forth unless they absolutely had to. And they weren't trying to build the organization as a whole and realize the mission as a whole, because they had these individual vision statements with their strategic initiatives. Now, just
Dr. Allen, it would have been a lot easier
Yes.
building that, an operational excellent organization when you're small and growing than getting to be this big gargantuan thing of Department of Defense or the government or this big multinational company with these silos. It's so hard
Yeah.
to break it down then because you've founded a culture that thrives in operating in that kind of environment. Now you're telling everybody, time out, guys. This isn't working. It got us to this point, but it's not an efficient and effective way to run a government, run a company.
Thus we say lean cultural transformation.
You bet.
And it's a matter of scale. It really is a matter of scale, and it's got to start with that kind of leadership from the top. As I was about to say, I just got off of a webinar earlier today with Jim Bowie on his book Lean Acres, and he was talking about strategy and strategic approaches. And I asked him a question at the end of that webinar about what his feelings were with respect to where the responsibility should reside in the government for the accountability of Lean Six Sigma type transformations. And after a little bit of a discussion, he came right up to the president and he said, this is where the leadership starts. This is where the accountability has to be to the American people. And then everyone else in the government is responsible in different layers, as the chief was saying, as it rolls down through the organization. It's going to take some time. But one of the beauties of lean transformation and the application of Six Sigma tools is that there's an awful lot of low-hanging fruit out there that can be picked, and those savings realized almost immediately in the hundreds of millions of dollars range with just some relatively simple concepts. So, Robert, good to see you back.
Yeah,
again.
Robert, while you were gone, we just formed another branch of the government, and it's the Operational Excellence Branch, and we nominated you to head that
Yes,
up, to kind of be able to go back and forth from the different branches to say, guys, you know, we have to have a time out here because we have a lot of overlap. We have processes that are archaic, and we need to share information back and forth if we're going to survive into the next millennium. What do you think about that?
Oh, jeepers. No, we don't have
No,
audio.
We don't have audio. Hang on, Robert. Ed, we don't have audio.
Okay, we should be
There
back
we go.
on
Now
it.
we got audio. So what do you think of that resolution we've just passed?
Well, I tell you, I appreciate the nomination, and the fact of the matter is, you know, throughout our DOD and the different branches and within the DOD main body, we have tremendous amounts of talent and expertise out there that are working this very same thing that you're talking about. Good. And it does take time. You know, if you look at the scale of doing a transformation with a corporation that may have 10, 20, 30,000 people, and now you're going across more than 3 million people with civilians and military included within the DoD system, and then you look at the complexity of the organization, you know, it needs to foster some understanding. But at the same time, you know, within the Navy Chiefs community, we have a mantra called results, not excuses.
Right.
Okay. Right. And so we need to always be leaning hard for those results. I don't want too much, you know, compassion out there about how difficult it is. We just need to keep moving forward. But I do want to acknowledge we do have some very sharp people out there. Within the Navy, I'm responsible to J.J. Perryman she is the director for CPI initiatives within the Department of the Navy. And I've had some direct dealings with her and some of her network, and I'm floored by the amount of knowledge base that's up there, the amount of talent and passion. But it's always something that we're going to be competing these efforts against other efforts.
Yep. And I have to commend you because I've had the opportunity to spend 48 hours on the USS Constellation aircraft carrier and the newly commissioned Bush as well. And boy, you come on those ships that most civilians don't get that opportunity to see how a well-oiled machine runs and the hearts and souls of these young men and women. It's just phenomenal. So I commend you in your CPI and your TOS and your Lean Six Sigma efforts out there, gentlemen. And any closing words, because I have to roll with the guys at Toby Hanna here. The Army, the Army's always got to push the Navy or something like this. So they're pushing me along. Do I have any last words, Robert, from you for our audience?
Well, I appreciate the opportunity for a final word here. What I wanted to say is, there should be a question in people's minds right now. Well, if this is so important, if we've got billions and billions and trillions of dollars at stake, what can I do? Okay, and my solution to that is to get involved. Don't just talk about, oh, well, the government wastes money. Be a factor in that. If you're a Lean Six Sigma expert yourself or some other type of CPI methodology, look for ways. Like Dr. Allen has basically adopted me, I believe, and he mentors for me on LinkedIn, on several of our groups. Including the Lean Transformation site, but several groups on LinkedIn, Process Excellence in Government. There's lots of LinkedIn opportunities. You have a LinkedIn group yourself,
Correct.
and this is how viewers and listeners can engage. But they can also engage through their elected officials. Okay, and like I said, our system is very, very complex and very difficult, but we need to keep the pressure on. We need to keep the pressure on to do things smartly with CPI. And I want my customer to make those demands on me, and that would be you, and that would be your listeners. And one other thing that I'll say, and I know that you got to move on. Thank you for what you do, and not just this Lean Nation broadcast, but I've did a little research on you. That's what I do. I research people. I'm familiar with your company's work on pillboxes to keep our troops safe overseas, engaged in battle. And I'll let you tie up that conversation on pillboxes, but.
It's important, and I'm glad that you mentioned, Robert, to talk to our congressional candidates, the U.S. Congress and the Senate, because as manufacturers, we have a lot of manufacturing companies listening, and invite those people to your organizations, because our congressmen and our senators need to see this in action in private industry, and they need to be referred. So if you're listening to Robert and Dr. Allen, refer them to this, that you heard about somebody doing this, because once that buzz starts happening on the Senate or the congressional floor, it'll help these guys get some fuel to sustain and carry on. So thank you for that point. It's critical. Thank you so much. And Dr. Allen, any closing words?
Yeah. There's not much I can say on top of what Robert's already said. He covered all the topics very well. I'd like to thank him once again for his great input. At least it's always an education to talk with him. And the same for Lean Nation TV and this opportunity. We have a tremendous amount of waste in government. I think everybody agrees with that, and I don't think there's anyone that could question it. In fact, there are individuals in the government themselves that could list myriad opportunities for eliminating that waste, and that's what Lean is all about. And Six Sigma is a tool for establishing control over variation. So when you put the two of them together in Lean Six Sigma, cultural transformation, you have some really powerful opportunities to remove waste, which is lowering costs. And what you do with that lowered cost in the federal government is really a political issue. Okay, we have the tools that are available to lower cost in any kind of an organization, and the one that we're talking about today, of course, is the government. And I want everybody to know and to understand that there are no more excuses with respect to lowering cost and eliminating waste in the federal government. just as Robert said, thumbs up. No more excuses, because if you didn't know anything else before this meeting today, you know now that there are tools out there that are currently working and that need to be supported and need to be applied even more diligently. So anything that you all can do to help with that would be greatly appreciated.
So they're not only, in closing to the Lean Nation, they're not only protecting us as U.S. citizens in this free democracy that we have, but now they're taking a look at protecting us in our pocketbooks as well.
Absolutely.
So I thank you both, gentlemen, for being on the Lean Nation. We're going to put up a post here how to get a hold of Dr. Allen here and how to get a hold of Robert Reid. So you might have some fan mail coming there on those long nights on the ship, on the deck plates, as they say. So thank you again, gentlemen, for being on the Lean Nation.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks,
All
Carl.
right. And you know, Lean Nation's going to take a 5-minute break, and we're going to be into segment 2. We have Brad Jones, the Director of Productivity Improvement and Innovation, a 6-time Shingo winning Toby Hanna Army Depot. Jeff O'Neill's with us too, the supervisor. They'll be back here in just 5 minutes.